Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I have an update for you guys on my 2022 eyeshadow palette challenge. If you're new to this series on my channel, I have challenged myself to use all of the palettes in my collection within this calendar year at least once, and I'm trying to use those palettes in different ways than I normally do. So if there's certain colors that I normally use within a palette, I'm trying to use different ones, maybe try different techniques, and just kind of push myself out of my comfort zone and push myself to use the things that I have in my collection. So this is, I think this is my third update on this series, but I will have the other videos linked in the description box down below if you've missed any and you're interested. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 palettes to share with you guys and the looks that I created with these. Some of these are going to be very summery looks and some of them are a little bit more fall. We sort of had that transition within this kind of update period. So jumping straight in, let's start with the Natasha Denona Peak palette. This is one that I got in a BoxyCharm, just a really beautiful 5-pan eyeshadow palette. And with this one, most of the time when I use this palette, as you can see, it's a very warm toned eyeshadow palette. So quite often with this one, I get a very orangey kind of warm toned look. So I tried to kind of stay more on this sort of pinky peachy side and get a little bit of a less warm, less orangey look this time. So I went in with this shade into the crease. I did this beautiful gold all over the lid, and I always use this one to sort of highlight the brow bone. With this type of a palette, it is hard to do something different than what you would normally do because it is not a monochromatic 5-pan, but it is, a very obvious color story. But I do really love this one. This is one that I do love to use in the summer and in the fall. Love these warm tones in the summertime and in the fall time. So that one turned out really nice. I do think it was different than what I normally get with that palette, even if only slightly different. The other one that's sort of a similar idea is this one from Dose of Colors. So this is the Sassy Siennas palette. This is a very monochromatic. They had a whole bunch of these at one time. I think some are still available and some aren't, but this is the warm toned Sassy Siennas one. So when I use this palette, I generally stick into this, like these three, maybe use this one. I don't think I've ever used the darkest color in this palette. So when I created the look that you'll see on the screen with this palette, I tried to use all of the colors. And sometimes that's the challenge that I'm doing within a palette, especially a smaller one, is can I create a look with all of the colors? So I actually used this dark color as an eyeliner that day. It was just a really pretty soft, warm toned eyeshadow look. Really love how it turned out. These little palettes are very good quality. I really enjoy these. And I hadn't used that one in a while. Again, it's one that I do like to use in the fall time. Another one I like to use during the fall time is this one here. This is what I have on my eyes today, and this is the Beauty Grandiose palette. I love this one. I've had it forever. I got it in a BoxyCharm. It looks like this. This is one of my go-to fall palettes. It's obviously that kind of warm toned color story with the kind of rusty brown shades and these sort of cranberry shades. And I was sitting there last night, I was looking at this palette trying to decide, like, what can I do with this that's different? So I usually either do kind of a cranberry look or kind of a warm tone brownie look. That's just, that's what there is in the palette. So the challenge for myself today was, can I use every color in this palette? Can I use all 8 shades to create a look? And so that's what I did today. So I went in first with patchouli, this sort of, it's not really yellow, it's not really tan, it's somewhere in the middle. I used this as sort of a starter transition shade. Then I went into the shade Clove here, which is sort of a peachy orange. Did that all through the crease. And then I lightly took the shade Cinnamon. I often use this one to sort of darken the outer corner before I go in with something like this. So I took this one on a fluffy brush today and I put that all through the crease as well to kind of darken the transition. And then I took the shade Poppy in my outer corner to kind of darken everything up. I took that underneath of the eyes as well. Then I took the shade Myrtle, which is this kind of coppery bronze color, I took that on like the outer portion of my lid, and I placed Primrose, which is more of this golden shade, on the inner part of my lid. And then I took the color Rose, which is this more metallic cranberry shade, and I put that under the eyes as well. And then I highlighted my inner corner with this shade called Jasmine. So I did use all 8 shades for this eyeshadow look today. I think it was probably a little unnecessary. I feel like it's not that different than a look that I would have created with this palette using less colors, but it was kind of fun to try to use every color in the palette. And I do like how the look turned out. I am like, for whatever reason, my eyes are really watery today. So I keep having to take like a Q-tip and this dark red shade and like touch up this outer corner. So if it's looking a little bit weird, that's probably why. But I do love that palette, especially like I said, in the fall time. I have actually a number of Ace Beaute palettes here that I've been working through in this challenge. So this is the Ace Beaute Scarlet Dusk palette. This is one that I always love to use in the summertime. It's got those pinks, it's got the oranges, it's got some of these nice deeper tones. But in general, I mean, if I had to ask you guys what color do I use most in this palette, I know we all know it's this one. You guys know I love these rosy pink tones. I just do. So when I used this palette this time, I really wanted to do something with these more orangey tones because they're not necessarily my go-tos in this palette. I generally try to do something with this rose color and, you know, these sort of champagne pinky shimmery colors, you know, maybe something a little deeper with these berries. But I generally stay away, especially from this shade called Crimson, which is a really vibrant orange. So I created a really fun orange look with this one for summertime, and I really, really loved that. This palette is really good. However, I do find the formula to be very different than the Grandiose palette. I've had this one longer. I got them both in BoxyCharms, but with this palette, the mattes are great. The mattes are like no problem with the mattes, but some of the metallics, the only metallics that are good are these lighter ones. These brighter, darker ones, even when you apply them with your finger, they don't do a lot. You really have to go in, you almost have to dig in with a brush and then spray your brush with setting spray to get any sort of impact. So not the best metallics in here, but the mattes are really, really good. Next up, I have the Anastasia Norvina palette. I bought this one for myself a number of years ago, I think for my birthday, and then dropped it like the next day. So it does look messy. I did repress the shadows that broke, but every time I use this palette, it really bums me out because I thought about it for like a year before I bought it, and then I dropped it like the next day. And if you've ever had one of these classic Anastasia palettes, they're very softly pressed eyeshadows, and so they break very easily. So all that to say, I hadn't used it in a long time, so I'm trying to hold it so that it's not flashing back the ring light. So I was trying to look at this palette and think like, what haven't I done with this? And usually when I dip into this palette, again, I like the pink tones. I really like this like rose gold color. I'll do something with this like bronzy shade. You know, I have my go-tos within this palette. So this time I sort of took the palette and looked at it this way, trying to figure out like what colors hadn't I used. And the main color that I hadn't used that I was surprised about was this purple right here called Celestial. So I built the whole look around that color in this palette, and it was really beautiful. This is a really beautiful palette. I should use it more or maybe replace it with one that's not broken so it doesn't make me sad. I just don't know. But I did really like the way that that turned out. And I think this is one of those palettes where like this could go for summer, this could be a fall palette, this could be a winter palette. Like there's something for every season in this one. And the other Anastasia palette that I used this time was the Riviera palette. This one was a gift from my friend Kate. And I love this palette. It's such a beautiful like rainbow palette. And again, I sort of looked at it this way trying to figure out what I hadn't used in here, and it was interesting to me that this gold had never been touched, this dark brown had never been touched. So basically like the neutrals in this palette had never been used. So when I gravitate towards this palette, obviously I'm in the mood for something bright and colorful. So this time I did create just kind of a neutral like brown and gold look with this one, and I thought it was really beautiful. Now, I don't necessarily think that would be a go-to look for me with this palette. Like I said, if I'm grabbing this palette, I'm probably wanting something a little bit more colorful, but it was nice to just sort of do something neutral, even though you wouldn't think you could get something neutral out of this palette. So really, really love this one. Again, the classic Anastasia formula, the same quality that you would expect from Anastasia in this Riviera palette. I don't think this was like a bestseller for them. I see this a lot into like Marshalls and Winners, but I do really like it. Next up, I have the Violet Voss Essentials 2 palette. This is a beautiful, bright palette here, and as you can probably imagine, when I use this one, I kind of stick to this row of neutrals and maybe this like copper color right here. I generally stick to those neutral colors, maybe do a pop of color along the bottom lash line or something like that when I use this palette. So this time I wanted to push myself to do a bright color out of this palette and have that color be the star. And the one that I had never used before was this one here called Wild Orchid. This was a color that was untouched in the palette. So all I did was just a one shadow look with that color. I think I took the beige color here into my crease just to add a little bit of definition in the crease, but then I did this all over the lid and I loved it. It was beautiful. I had so many compliments on my makeup that day. I think it turned out really, really nice. And again, a good reminder to myself that I often overcomplicate things when I look at palettes and think, well, how can I use this and this and this and this together? You don't always have to. Sometimes you can just do a one eyeshadow look because that color is real pretty, you know? So love the way that that turned out. The other Ace Beaute palette that I was using this go around was the Nostalgia palette. This is one that screams summer to me, and so that was when I busted it out, was in the summertime. And of course, guess what my most commonly used colors are within this palette? These three right here, right here. So there's still several colors in this palette that haven't been used, and I did intend to do more looks with this palette, but there's just been a lot going on in my personal life lately, so it just hasn't been the time for bright eyeshadow looks. However, the day that I used this, I went in just with this green color. I had gotten a new highlighter in a Babe box, and it was this beautiful teal mermaid highlighter, and I really wanted to do something with that day, so I just took this green into the crease all over the lid and along the bottom lash line, and then I tapped that mermaid highlight all over the lid on top, and it was so pretty. It was so pretty. I love this shade of green. I just think it's so unique. It's just such a nice palette. This is a very like Crayola kind of palette, you know, like the colors are very saturated, very like true to color, quite easy to work with for as colorful as they are. So I'm excited to bust this one back out again next summer, or maybe in the spring, or maybe even in the fall. You know, there could be like a good fall look like right here, you know. Really happy with the way that that look turned out. Another palette that I always love to use in the summertime is this one from LMR Cosmetics. And I always gravitate towards certain colors. There's something about this green right here that is it's so beautiful. So every time I use this palette, I always want to do something with this. Or I end up doing sort of an aqua look with these two. So this time I wanted to challenge myself to do something a little bit more neutral with this palette, and I pretty much just focused on this sort of berry shade down here. I did that on the outer half of the eye, defining the outer crease and into the crease a little bit, took that underneath of my lash line, and then I just applied this like shimmery champagne all over the inner part of the lid, and I thought it was a really beautiful look that you wouldn't think I got from this palette. So love that one. The quality of this one is so good. I was not disappointed, and I was like kind of re-inspired, even though this is a smaller color story. And last but not least, I have the Pretty Vulgar Nightingale palette. So this is one that I've had for a long time, and I always say this is like my perfect smoky eye eyeshadow palette. It really has everything that you need to create a smoky eye. I take this with me quite often when I'm doing makeup on clients. If somebody's like, I want a smoky eye, this is the palette. It's got everything you need. But when I use this one, I generally do like a gray smoky eye. So this time I wanted to see if I could do that same kind of effect, but with the browns. So I did this hide and seek color into my crease as my transition shade. I did this shade Clutch right here all over the lid, which was so beautiful. It's very reflective, very metallic. And then I used this shade here called Flip Out, which is just like a really rich dark brown, and I used that to darken up the outer corner underneath of the lash line, and I highlighted with this shade here called Pillow Fight, and I really liked the way that that had turned out. It was like a really cool toned brown smoky eye, and I love the way it turned out. It is October now, so it is fall time, and I was kind of ready to transition into those like the darker looks, darker colors, and this was like the perfect palette for that. So those are all the palettes that I have used over the last few months. I do have quite a few left to go, but not as many as you would think. I was sort of panicking for a minute there. I was like, oh my God, I'm never gonna get them all in time. But I think I'm gonna do it. I think I'm still gonna achieve my goal. I've had a few hiccups along the road where I've had periods of time where I'm not wearing makeup for personal reasons and personal things going on in my life, but I think we're back on track now, and I'm excited. I actually pulled some palettes out of my collection. If you guys haven't seen my most recent Shop My Stash video, I'll link that in the description box down below, but I pulled some specific palettes out of my collection that I want to make sure that I use during the next month or two while it's still fall before we move into the holiday season. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are liking this series. Let me know in the comments down below if you are. What was your favorite look? Do you have any of these eyeshadow palettes? And yeah, I just always love to chat with you guys in the comments down below. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon in another video. Bye.